Have you ever heard of a man who changed the course of history? A man who spent 27 years of his life behind bars, not because he committed a crime, but because he believed in justice and equality. A man who became a symbol of the struggle for freedom, not only in his homeland, but across the entire world. Yes, I'm talking about Nelson Mandela, the man who turned suffering into hope, prison into a school, and hatred into love. But did you know that Mandela's story is not just a tale of fighting against racial discrimination? It's a profound human story, filled with lessons and insights that can change the way you look at life. How did a political prisoner become the president of a nation? And how was he able to forgive his enemies after all he had endured? In this video, we'll take you on an exciting journey to uncover the life of this extraordinary man, from his childhood in the villages of South Africa to his long years in prison, and finally to his moments of great triumph. We'll explore the secrets that made him a global icon and how he inspired millions around the world. Are you ready to learn how one man can change the world? Stay with us, because this story isn't just about Mandela. It's about the power of will and how a person can create change even in the darkest of circumstances. But before we begin, let me ask you this. Could you endure 27 years in prison for a cause you believe in? Could you forgive those who wronged you? These questions aren't simple, but they were part of Mandela's daily life. So, let's embark on this journey together, one that's filled with excitement and lessons. In this video, we'll explore Mandela's childhood and how he grew up in a society plagued by racial discrimination, his political struggle, and how he became a voice for freedom in South Africa, his years in prison, and how he transformed that difficult period into an opportunity for reflection and growth, his great triumph and how he became the first black president of South Africa, his global legacy and how Mandela continues to inspire millions to this day. So, if you want to know how one man can change the world and how the power of will can achieve the impossible, you're in the right place. Don't go anywhere, because this story will take you on a journey you won't forget. Get ready, because we're about to step into the world of Nelson Mandela, a world full of challenges, but also achievements that will leave you in awe. Let the journey begin. Nelson Mandela's childhood. Growing up in a divided world. Nelson Mandela's story begins in a small, rural village in the eastern Cape of South Africa, a place far removed from the global stage he would one day command. Born on July 18, 1918, in the village of Mbizo, Mandela entered a world that was deeply divided by race, culture, and power. His childhood was shaped not only by the traditions of his Thembu tribe, but also by the harsh realities of a society built on racial inequality. To understand Mandela's journey, we must first step back in time and explore the world he was born into, a world where the color of your skin determined your destiny, and where the seeds of his lifelong fight for justice were first planted. The village of Mbizo, a humble beginning. Mandela's early years were spent in the rolling hills of Mbizo, a picturesque village nestled along the banks of the Mbash River. Life here was simple, rooted in the traditions of the Xhosa people. Mandela's father, Gadla Henry Mfakeni-Iswa, was a local chief and a counselor to the Thembu royal family. Though not wealthy, the Mandela family was respected within their community. Young Mandela, whose birth name was Relila, a Xhosa word meaning pulling the branch of a tree, or more colloquially, troublemaker, spent his days playing with other children, herding cattle, and learning the customs of his people. His mother, Nosakini Fanny, was a devout Christian who instilled in him a sense of discipline and faith. But this idyllic childhood was soon disrupted. When Mandela was just 9 years old, his father was stripped of his chieftainship by the colonial authorities after dispute with a local magistrate. This event was Mandela's first encounter with the injustices of a system that favored white settlers over indigenous leaders. The family was forced to move to Kunu, a nearby village, where they lived in even more modest circumstances. The shadow of apartheid, a society divided. To understand Mandela's childhood, we must also understand the world he was growing up in. South Africa in the early 20th century was a country deeply divided by race. The seeds of apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation, were already being sown long before it was officially enacted in 1948. The British and Dutch colonial powers had established a hierarchy that placed white Europeans at the top, while black Africans, Indians, and mixed-race communities were relegated to the bottom. Laws were designed to strip black South Africans of their land, their rights, and their dignity. They were forced to live in designated areas, work in menial jobs, and carry passes to move freely. For Mandela, these injustices were not abstract concepts. They were part of his everyday reality. As a child, he witnessed how his father and other black leaders were disrespected and undermined by white authorities. He saw how his family and community struggled to maintain their dignity in the face of systemic oppression. Education, a glimpse of a different world. Despite the challenges, Mandela's childhood was not without hope. Education became a beacon of light in his life. When he was 7 years old, Mandela became the first in his family to attend school. It was here that he was given the name Nelson by his teacher, a common practice at the time for African children to receive English names. Mandela's mother, recognizing the importance of education, made great sacrifices to ensure he could continue his studies. After his father's death, Mandela was sent to live with Chief John Jintaba Dalindibo, the acting regent of the Thembu people. This move would prove to be a turning point in his life. In the regent's household, Mandela was exposed to a world of privilege and opportunity that was rare for most black South Africans. He attended a Methodist mission school where he excelled in his studies and developed a love for learning. He also witnessed the regent's leadership and diplomacy, which would later influence his own approach to politics. The influence of tradition and culture. Mandela's childhood was deeply rooted in the traditions and culture of the Xhosa people. From an early age, he participated in initiation ceremonies, learned the history of his ancestors, and absorbed the values of his community. These traditions taught him the importance of respect, courage, and unity. One of the most significant events in Mandela's early life was his initiation into manhood at the age of 16. During this ceremony, he was given the name Dalibunga, meaning founder of the council or convener of dialogue. This name reflected the leadership role he was expected to play in his community. But even as Mandela embraced his cultural heritage, he began to question some of the traditions he had grown up with. For example, he was critical of the practice of arranged marriages, which he saw as a restriction on personal freedom. This early questioning of authority would later evolve into a broader challenge against the injustices of apartheid, the first stirrings of resistance. As Mandela grew older, he became increasingly aware of the racial inequalities that surrounded him. One incident, in particular, left a lasting impression on him. When he was a teenager, he accompanied the regent to a meeting with white officials. During the meeting, the regent was treated with disrespect, and Mandela could sense the deep-seated prejudice in the way the officials spoke to him. This experience planted a seed of anger and determination in Mandela. He began to realize that the oppression of his people was not just a matter of individual prejudice, but a systemic issue that needed to be addressed. At the same time, Mandela was exposed to stories of resistance and resilience. He learned about figures like Chief Bambatha, who had led a rebellion against colonial rule, and he heard about the growing movement for black rights in South Africa. These stories inspired him and gave him a sense of purpose. Leaving home, the journey to Johannesburg. Mandela's journey took a dramatic turn when he decided to leave the Eastern Cape and move to Johannesburg, the bustling heart of South Africa. This decision was driven by a desire to escape an arranged marriage and to pursue his education and ambitions. In Johannesburg, Mandela was exposed to a world that was both exciting and harsh. The city was a melting pot of cultures and ideas, but it was also a place where racial segregation was deeply entrenched. Black South Africans were forced to live in overcrowded townships like Soweto, while white residents enjoyed the privileges of the city center. Mandela's experiences in Johannesburg would shape his political awakening. He enrolled at the University of Fort Hare, the only higher education institution for black South Africans at the time, but his time there was cut short when he was expelled for participating in a student protest. This act of defiance marked the beginning of Mandela's journey as a political activist. The legacy of Mandela's childhood. Mandela's childhood was a tapestry of tradition, struggle, and resilience. It was a time of learning and growth, but also of pain and injustice. The lessons he learned during these formative years would stay with him for the rest of his life. From his father, he learned the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. From his mother, He inherited a sense of faith and discipline. From the regent, he gained an understanding of leadership and diplomacy. And from his community, he absorbed the values of courage, unity, and resilience. But perhaps the most important lesson Mandela learned during his childhood was the power of hope. Despite the injustices he witnessed, he never lost faith in the possibility of a better future. This hope would become the driving force behind his lifelong fight for freedom and equality. Nelson Mandela's childhood was the foundation of his extraordinary journey. It was here, in the villages of the Eastern Cape, that the seeds of his greatness were planted. And it was here that he first began to dream of a world where all people, regardless of their race, could live in dignity and peace. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore Mandela's early years as a political activist and how he became a voice for freedom in South Africa. But for now, let us remember the boy from Vizo who dared to dream of a better world and who would one day change the course of history. Nelson Mandela, the voice of freedom. Nelson Mandela's journey from a small village in the Eastern Cape to becoming a global icon of freedom and justice is one of the most inspiring stories of the 20th century. His life was marked by extraordinary courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief in the power of hope. In this video, we'll explore the key chapters of Mandela's life: his political struggle against apartheid, his long years in prison, his triumphant rise to the presidency, and the legacy he left behind. Each chapter reveals not only the depth of his character, but also the lessons we can all learn from his extraordinary journey. Chapter 1. The Political Struggle, Becoming a Voice for Freedom. Mandela's political awakening began in the 1940s, during a time when South Africa was becoming increasingly divided under the weight of racial segregation. The National Party, which came to power in 1948, formalized apartheid as a system of governance, institutionalizing racism and oppression. For Mandela, this was a call to action. He joined the African National Congress, ANC, a political party dedicated to fighting for the rights of black South Africans. Initially, the ANC pursued peaceful protests and civil disobedience, inspired by the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. However, as the government's repression grew more violent, Mandela and his colleagues realized that more drastic measures were needed. The Defiance Campaign and the birth of Umkhonto we Sizwe. In 1952, Mandela played a key role in the Defiance Campaign, a mass protest against apartheid laws. Thousands of black South Africans deliberately broke discriminatory laws, such as curfews and pass requirements, to challenge the system. The campaign marked a turning point in Mandela's life, as he emerged as a prominent leader within the ANC. But the government's response was brutal. Protesters were arrested, beaten, and even killed. Mandela himself was arrested and banned from attending public gatherings. Despite these setbacks, he remained committed to the cause. By the early 1960s, Mandela and other ANC leaders concluded that peaceful resistance alone would not be enough to dismantle apartheid. In 1961, they founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, the armed wing of the ANC. Mandela explained that this was not a choice they made lightly, but a necessary response to the government's violence. It would be wrong and unrealistic for African leaders to continue preaching peace and nonviolence at a time when the government met our peaceful demands with force, Mandela said. However, Mandela's involvement with Umkhonto we Sizwe would soon lead to his arrest and imprisonment. Chapter 2. The Years in Prison, Reflection and Growth. In 1962, Mandela was arrested and charged with inciting worker strikes and leaving the country without a passport. 2 years later, during the infamous Rivonia trial, he and several other ANC leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment for sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a maximum security prison off the coast of Cape Town. It was here that he would spend the next 18 years of his life, confined to a small cell and subjected to harsh conditions. But even in prison, Mandela refused to be broken. He turned his incarceration into an opportunity for reflection, growth, and education. He studied law, history, and philosophy, engaging in deep conversations with his fellow prisoners. He also worked to improve conditions for inmates, earning the respect of both prisoners and guards. The power of forgiveness and reconciliation. One of the most remarkable aspects of Mandela's time in prison was his ability to forgive. Despite the injustices he suffered, he never allowed bitterness to consume him. Instead, he focused on the future, envisioning a South Africa where all people could live together in peace. Mandela understood that forgiveness was not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength. He believed that reconciliation, not revenge, was the key to building a better society. This philosophy would later become the foundation of his leadership as president. Chapter 3. The Triumph, becoming South Africa's first black president. Mandela's release from prison in 1990 marked the beginning of a new era for South Africa. After 27 years behind bars, he emerged not as a bitter revolutionary, but as a symbol of hope and reconciliation. Over the next 4 years, Mandela worked tirelessly to negotiate an end to apartheid and pave the way for democratic elections. His efforts culminated in the historic 1994 election, in which South Africans of all races were allowed to vote for the first time. On May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as South Africa's first black president. In his inaugural address, he declared, "Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another." Mandela's presidency was marked by a commitment to reconciliation and nation-building. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to address the crimes of apartheid, not through punishment but through truth and healing. He also focused on improving education, healthcare, and housing for the country's black majority. Chapter 4. The Global Legacy, Inspiring Millions. After stepping down as president in 1999, Mandela continued to be a global advocate for peace, justice, and human rights. He founded the Nelson Mandela Foundation to promote social justice and reconciliation, and he became a vocal supporter of causes such as HIV/AIDS awareness and education. Mandela's legacy extends far beyond South Africa. He is remembered as a symbol of courage, resilience, and the power of forgiveness. His life has inspired countless individuals and movements around the world, from civil rights activists to political leaders. In 2009, the United Nations declared July 18th Mandela's birthday as Nelson Mandela International Day, a day dedicated to promoting peace and community service. The day serves as a reminder of Mandela's belief that it is in your hands to make a difference. Conclusion: the enduring spirit of Mandela. Nelson Mandela's life was a testament to the power of hope, resilience, and the human spirit. From his early days as a political activist to his years in prison and his triumphant rise to presidency, Mandela's journey reminds us that even in the darkest of times, we have the power to create change. His legacy continues to inspire millions around the world, proving that one person's courage and determination can indeed change the course of history. As we reflect on Mandela's life, let us remember his words: "It always seems impossible until it's done." Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Nelson Mandela. If you found this video inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of courage and hope. Together, we can keep Mandela's legacy alive.